All right, I think we got it there. Hey, family. This is Jermaine Thomas with another episode of Sunday School Live, aka The Professor. Listen, we're continuing in our episode series, What is it to our human existence? This is part 3 of episode 20. And so we're going to get into that. Let me just check in here and make sure I'm coming in loud and clear. Give me 1 second. Okay, yep. I want to thank you guys for tracking with us and tuning in here on another episode. Those been tracking with us since day one. To our Goma family as a whole, God bless you. I love you. Listen, if you guys get a chance to, please like, share, tell me where you're tuning in from. There's other voices and people that you would love to hear from here on Goma. There's Pastor Mike, and there's Dr. Catherine Toon as well, and other voices that's highlighted here. But you have to subscribe to the channel so that you can catch those videos as well as mine, which come on every Sunday at 4 p.m. Central. So, listen, we're going to continue in this lecture series. One of the subject experts that I used last week, I want to pivot there to that video. I want to kind of review a little bit back in what we covered in part 2. So I'm going to cue that up and let that play for a little bit. And then I'm going to jump back in and then we'll drive this conversation and dialogue forward as we always do in using our subject experts. And so, and then from there, we'll continue with part 3 and kind of pull this thing all the way out in the foundation that we built in part 1, what we covered in part 2. And so we're going to use this as a bridge conversation. So I'm going to bring up my subject expert. And again, if you guys are tuning in for the first time, this show is a exploration show. We explore, we look at various Christian topics and themes with respect to philosophy, history, science, and theologically, and look at the a particular topic or subject in that manner. And we just explore and we just have a conversation. So you guys are tuning into that conversation here. And so we're having a conversation about what is it to our human existence. And so we looked at that from these various schools of thought. And I'll get into that. But check out this video. It's about near-death experiences. These sisters share their experiences. So I want to start there. And then we'll continue with our dialogue for part 3. Hold on, guys.
The light started to appear. And that's when I realized that this was death. This was my death.
When I died, I was 31. What I experienced from that moment on just changed my life forever. My name is Betty J. Eady. I am 78 years old. I had a near-death experience.
My name is Jessie Sawyer, and I've had a near-death experience. If anybody had told me 10 years ago that I would have had a near-death experience, I would not have believed them. I didn't believe in these things. I didn't even believe in God anymore. I had started becoming sick, and I was going to different doctors and specialists, and nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. And eventually, after about 9 months of different tests and smaller procedures, they decided that a hysterectomy would help them kind of get a better idea of what was happening inside of me. They didn't find anything wrong on the inside. They did a uterine and ovarian biopsy, and everything was clear. So after 2 nights in the hospital, I was released to go home. It'd probably only been 6 to 8 hours, and I just felt this extreme pain in my stomach. It felt like someone had taken out my insides and put them in a blender, blended them on low power, poured gasoline on them, lit them on fire, and then shoved them back inside of me. So my husband rushed me to the ER. They admitted me. I had very low blood pressure. My heart rate was 145. I was running a low-grade fever, and they did some scans and found out that I was bleeding internally. I didn't have enough blood in my system to really put me back into a surgery. So I started receiving antibiotics. I had blood transfusions. It was probably between like 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And when I slept, there was no way I ever could escape the pain. But I'm staring at the wall, and it was like, the best way I can describe it is that my eyes opened, and then they opened again. And when they opened again, I was in this endless, misty, white room. It was like just this space. And the very first thing that I realized was that I was able to stand up straight, which is something that I hadn't been able to do since the surgery. And I was astonished at how perfect I felt. No pain. I felt like the perfect version of myself. And so that really stuck with me. And in the distance, I saw somebody kind of waiting. And I immediately, even though I didn't see this person at first, I immediately recognized who it was. And it was one of my best friends named Anthony, who had died about 2 years before. And I was just so.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to. Oh, sorry about that. I wanted to grab a little bit of her story I shared on part 2. And so I'll put the link in part 2 so you guys can check that out in its entirety, because I actually showed that it's her and another lady's testimony about a near-death experience. And then there's a doctor that's given a narrative in between the conversation there about the science of near-death experience and this research that's ongoing. And so that's kind of what we looked at. We looked at philosophically what is the idea of our human existence, where we come from, how the different sciences are looking to answer that. We looked at evolution, we looked at intelligent design. And then in part 2, what I wanted to build an emphasis on is, again, the idea around science, not just, oh, that's just religion and just writing it off. But here we have research and data looking at this reality of that we're more than just our physical form, we're more than just our physical body, that there is something to a spirit man or a spirit body. And so we have science looking at that, given through the different accounts of near-death experiences. And so, again, in exploring and looking at or researching about our human existence, you come across all kinds of information, and everybody vying for a particular school of thought or perspective and saying, well, hey, mine is right or this is right. I think in our journey of exploration to really understand our human existence is really to consider our human existence. And not necessarily is always this external pursuit um, for our existence. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with archaeology and, the science of sociology, understanding old ancient civilizations and what happened to them, and the mindset, and how it would have looked. And so, History Channel and the Discovery Channel, all highlight that and give us a context for that to understand our history. And so there's nothing wrong with wanting to shape our world in that way, and understanding how the world see itself and exploring that. But again, oftentimes our search or research is always outside of ourselves. Could our exploration into really understanding our human existence, could it be also internally, and realizing the reality and the substance of who we are, what we are at our core? more than just our biology, and that's unique in of itself. I mean, the our physical frame, the science of anatomy, of our physical anatomy, and understanding how the body works, that have given advancement into medical technology and medicine, causing us to live longer and helping the body to heal faster. And so there's this breakthrough in that, but then there's this uniqueness of the human body itself. And so a lot of science has shifted to that. A lot of the cognitive sciences have shifted to that, and changing our perceptions and mental health, and really looking at and starting from the inside out as far as change and transformation with respect to what may happen conditionally in our society around us. Again, Jermaine, what does this have to do with our human existence? It has a lot to do in exploring, the core of our existence, because um, this is where we live. I believe the economy of heaven, or the economy of the kingdom, if you will, is about people, has always been about people. We see Jesus's interactions and his teachings was always about interacting with his society and the surrounding society, culturally, religiously, culturally, at that, and addressing the issues and the matters of his day, and causing his audience, or challenging his audience, to not look without, not just settle on the ideas about God from these outside sources, these institutions of religion, if you will, with two competing voices, the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And uh, so again, these contexts of wanting to understand our human existence, it exists. Our Bible, the Christian Bible, records these accounts. And so this exploration into this journey of discovery about what our human existence really is, I think, is really a self-discovery that really needs to take place, a self-awareness to wake up to the reality of who we are and who we have always been. That I said this, and I know for some people this sounds sacrilegious, but um, listen, yes, let's emphasize the birth of Jesus, and to highlight that Christian narrative and account and story, and however you want to read into the story and account of his birth, his life. But if we're going to celebrate his, let's celebrate ours as well. I mean, if we think about Christ is central to everything, and all life exists in Christ and because of Christ. And so if that is the reference point, or the point of reference is Christ, then all of our lives has value. All of our lives, because we all come from God, has value. And so our birth should be just as valued and just as celebrated than that of Jesus too. And so again, I believe that that's also looking at our human existence and exploring the beauty of it. So I want to shift to another subject expert, and we'll continue further in this conversation and dialogue. And again, I hope you all are enjoying this conversation. You like, Jermaine, what are you talking about? This is part three of a three-part series, and so you have to go back and start at part one, part two, and then part three. And so this is part three of episode 20 of a continued lecture series on exploring what is it to our human existence, looking at that from various schools of thought and perspectives. And so we're going to bring up another subject expert, Bruce Lipton. And we're going to hear him dialogue and talk about his research, and and talk about the human anatomy from his perspective. And so after that, we'll continue in our conversation and dialogue. Hold on, family.
The environment that we live in is based on a fractal geometry, not the geometry that we all learned in school, which was called Euclidean geometry. And to give you a simple example of that is make nature using Euclidean geometry. When we were 5, we made a tree that was a column with a ball on the top. And that is about as close to Euclidean geometry in nature as you could get. The reality is nature is not programmable. You can't make nature filling in a Euclidean geometry equation. However, fractal geometry, a newer understanding of geometry, it represents that nature is built on self-similar patterns built on top of each other. So it's like the concept they talk about of Russian nesting dolls, where you open up one doll and there's another doll inside, and then you open that one up and there's another doll, and they're not exactly the same, but they're self-similar, and they all are one on top of the other. Nature is built on this understanding. The relevance is this is why if you understand how a cell works, you understand how a human works, because a human is a cell reincarnate, in the sense that all the functions in a human body are already present in every living cell. So we were programmed after the cells. The relevance of that is that when we evolve, we become cells in a larger structure called humanity. And as cells evolve, as animals evolve, so will humanity evolve. It's a pattern, and it's a self-similar pattern, very different than the nature of Darwinian theory, which is based on random mutations, that everything is an accident, that it's not. So the old axiom, as is above, as is below, becomes a geometry of nature. So if you understand any level of the structure, you automatically have insight into every other level of the structure. The point about it simply is this: inside of our bodies are approximately 50 trillion cells. What's the relevance is that we think of ourselves as a singularity when that's farthest from the truth. We are, by scientific definition, we are a community of 50 trillion sentient cells. I used to culture these cells, take them out of your body, put them in a culture dish, and the relevance about that is that these cells have their own intelligence. They grow in a petri dish. You don't have to tell them how to do anything. They know how to grow, divide, form, all the things they're supposed to do. They're innately intelligent. The relevance about that is, think about this issue, that we're having trouble right now with about 6.5 billion people, trying to get them to live on the entire surface of the planet. That within your body right now are 50 trillion sentient individual living cells in a matrix that represents a nation. And the old mystics would say the answers lie within, or seek within for the answers. And the fact is this: if you understand the dynamics of how 50 trillion cells can live in the smallest environment under your skin, in harmony, in bliss, because if you're in bliss, so are they. If you can understand how 50 trillion entities can live in this harmony, all the rules are there for a few billion people to live on a planet.
Wow, 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 right? I love that. Again, speaking to the uniqueness of our own humanity. And I believe I talked about this in part two, that, there's no command of my body. There's no command of my cells in my body. It just innately does what it's created to do. So there's life, there's purpose even coded in our cells. It's coded in our DNA. And so just even at a natural level, or just peering into the science of our human anatomy or our human makeup, and you consider it, it just makes you, it shifts your perception again about self, and what you relate to self as, more than just mere human, more than just these social constructs, these cultural social constructs in our lives. We're more than just the sum of our parts. And if we can relate to each other off that basis of understanding, I think that, a lot of the world peace that we're looking for, we'll begin to see. Because here, as the scripture would say, here no man after the flesh but the spirit. But we understand the reality of our nature, who we are, what we are, and who we all are. And I think more of the science is speaking to that, is speaking to us about our unity, is speaking to us about how everything is connected. And I think that we're going to see more and more of the sciences, the biology, speak to that. Even in the quantum science and studies and research that's happening there, is also giving us data and research to look at this framework, or building for us this framework or this context of thinking, that everything is connected, and how it's further reinforces this notion and idea of oneness, and how one we really are. We come from one love. We're all made from one love, one fashion of love and facet of love. God is love. And so we were shaped in love. If in and of, again, here's this philosophical thought and thinking too about eternity, or thinking about um, our reality as something eternal, not something you seek, but a reality of what is, that we have always been. And so again, the science speaks to that, about how energy cannot be destroyed. And so science affirms, how energy, again, this all goes back to exploring and understanding our humanity, that you can be a Christian and you can hold to beliefs and ideas of evolution, very much so. Some people would say, well, that's incompatible in beliefs, and that's not necessarily true. You can have a duplicity of ideas. I think sometimes in our Christian tradition or context is only like one way of thinking that has to be adhered to, and that we don't give voice or we don't give life to diversity of thought, perspective. We say we're welcoming of it, but we actually not. And so if it's not how it fits in my framework, then it's just it's just not what it is. And so my view is what it is. That's oftentimes how we approach these subjects in Christendom. But over in philosophy and science, we tend to argue, or there tends to be the argument of dissenting voices and based upon research. Now over here in theology, is not, you don't see a lot of that. But I believe that we can change the narrative. Even in that, we can establish work that even future generations could build upon. And I believe, that wall that often comes between culture and church, is being broken down, and we're seeing it as one culture instead of these distinctions and dichotomies. It don't have to be. Again, Jermaine, what does this have to do with our human existence? And exploring that. And I believe, again, to exploring our human existence also speaks to our sociology, our interactions, and how we interact with each other. How we see ourselves is indicative to that. How we perceive the world around us. I was sharing with someone the other day how there was this research done. I can't recall the actual theory, but it's out there. You can research this. And so they did a study with two sets of teachers and two sets of students. And so what they did was, there was these underperforming students, and there was these overperforming students. And so they told the teacher that they was going to educate some overachieving students, and this other teacher was told that the undeveloped students and things like that. So they switched the students around, and so of course, the teacher who thought that they were teaching undeveloped students was teaching the overdeveloped. And so from this research, they found that these normally overachieving students actually performed lower than they normally did. And then the teacher who thought that they were teaching these overachiever students, they were actually the underachievers, actually perform higher than what they normally test at. So there was this theory about perception. Basically, it's about perception and how a person of authority, of power, influence can perceive a certain people of influence, and how their perception can weigh and change a reality for them. That's deep, but that's important to consider about the power and the capacity that we have, even in our own humanity. That we have the power to create a reality, not just for ourselves, but those that are around us, and being intentional about that. We are, these words that I speak, they are spirit and they are life. And so the words that we have the capacity to speak life to life, if you will, to speak spirit to spirit in another person's life. And so now in my Christian tradition, in faith and practice, we say it's prophecy, or words of knowledge, or the gifts of the Spirit and things like that. Now, somebody in the other faith practice may call it something different. But again, these things are not mutually exclusive to one faith or the other. I just think that this is just the reality, that speaks to the core of our human existence. We again, here go the science, right? The science looking at ESP, looking at telepathic abilities. We have data research in that. Nothing, I don't think, is real conclusive, but we do have. There's evidence that police and other intelligent agencies have used people with supposed psychic abilities, seers, if you will, that can see or perceive the future. And so we have science around that, as well as the myth, given from our comic books, in our story, in our we seem like we have an appetite for this in our culture. This is why Marvel Avengers takes off and have the influence that he has, because of it speaks to the metaphysical, right? It speaks to the mystery, it speaks to the supernatural, in wondrous ways, and how we see ourselves in some um, symbolic sense, right? That we can consider that. But that's just something to think about holistically, and how we judge and perceive the world around us. But perceptions is paramount, in how we interact and live in the world around us, and what we have and what we carry as human beings. And so, as we continue to track with this thinking, this lecture in exploring what is it to our human existence, I hope something that we're discussing, where we're tracking along in our thinking here, or even in our presentation, that really speaks to your heart or speaks to you. Please take the opportunity to leave a comment there, down in the comment section. Tell us where you're tuning in from. Like, share, please leave a comment. Feel free to follow me on YouTube, or follow me on my Facebook channel, or my Facebook page. And you can get some other stuff and things that I post and talk about over there. And feel free to inbox. People generally do. I'm approachable, and so people ask tons of questions about various things that I talk about and discuss, including these subjects, and what we're looking at. Again, this is Jermaine Thomas, A.K.A. the Professor, and this is Sunday School Live, part 3 of episode 20, exploring what it is to our human existence. And so, what we looked at in part 1, we looked at the schools of thought when it comes to evolution and creation. We looked at a video clip of one of our subject experts that explored the theories of evolution and how the Big Bang Theory. And then there was some other subject expert clips that we looked at, that caused us to look at intelligent design, and looked at the philosophy behind that, and defining some terms with respect to intelligent design, and where that school of thought came from, and how it's still here today. And so we looked at this. We looked at the story of Adam and Eve in Genesis. We used the Bible Project has great videos, and so I encourage that. I always recommend that as a tool, a source for Bible studies, and for children's church, and because of the visuals and the graphics. And so we used a clip from the Bible Project that covered Genesis, and we talked about the Genesis account. And we talked also about how there are other Genesis accounts and stories, and looking at how the Genesis story, also becomes interwoven into our human existence. It becomes a part of the conversation and the dialogue theologically, about our human existence. And so we talked a little bit about that, but I don't think we got into really hard about that, and how the Hebraic rabbinic teachings and how they look at the Genesis account more allegorical, more than it is a statement of science and history that points to our human existence, but to give us a picture of us trying to understand our human existence with respect to the divine and this disconnect between humanity and God, and how, we've established this separate mindset, this mindset of God out there, and then we had these perceptions of God and ideas of God, or what you would see in the biblical accounts is these ideas and perceptions of God. God is a God that desires these sacrifices and covenants in order to have a relationship, with these people, and not just any people, as special people, right? That's, preserving this male bloodline. And so we see God presented in this form of preserving a kingly bloodline. And so, we see these stories layered within the biblical text, right? That again speaks to trying to understand our humanity and the divine, or the divinity, or understand God and our relation to God. And so we have this Hebraic ancient text that gives us these oral cultural traditions that writers try to grasp and write about, with respect to their history and understanding their world and their context about God. But then, we hear this rumble, in this town, and this commotion about the birth of Christ, and the again a layered story that continues this continued dialogue of bloodlines and royalty and messiahs, coming down. And the other part to it that speaks to the cultural myth, too, or the cultural accounts and stories, that these accounts are not nothing new, guys. And so when you hear the debates out there and say, well, this story you can find in Egypt and the history, those things are true. And so this idea of God coming down through this royal bloodline, and God worship, and the king being worshipped as God, was not a new concept. The writers in the Hebraic rabbinic faith brought it down to a more human level in some sense, right? In writing about God. And so this is how the text, and so I'm not trying to downplay the Bible. I just want us to get this idea around the Bible in exploration, and even how through the scriptures you see this exploration of humanity and trying to understand our human existence and try to give explanation to it relative to understanding our world and how we interact in this world. And so we see this rabbinic teaching and account of their Messiah, and then Jesus, and referencing Jesus, and Jesus comes, and again there's this commotion that's happening in Bethlehem, that's happening in Jerusalem, with respect to Jesus' ministry and that of his disciples, and there's this uprooting of this old system of covenant relationship you see in this context. And then there's this change of governments and the Roman occupancy in the background. And so all of these things are layered, and they're giving a story and account of trying to understand a human existence. And Jesus gives us a picture, a clear picture of what we believe what God looks like. And so, yeah, this all speaks into our human existence, and looking at that, and looking at the accounts of the gospel and the message of Jesus, or what the writers are ascribing to Jesus and his message and what he was saying to us. And one of the things um, that I was talking about even on social media the other day was this: when we talk about Jesus being the way, the truth, and the life. Um, in much of our Christian tradition, right, or how I've been conditioned to see this verse or to understand this verse, was to see it as, as this claim of superiority in the Christian faith, and saying that our faith, the Christian faith, is the right faith, and everything else everybody's being deceived by the devil or the demons, or the god of this world. Okay, so that's pretty much our thinking that goes into that verse, irrespective to what that statement may have been culturally, what it meant to them, or even the reference or the context and what Jesus was speaking that in. And so we ignore, Jesus's not just his messianic roots, but his Jewish traditional roots, and even the larger cultural influence that had on their thinking and their beliefs. And so, just like Chicago, right? We have that people tell by our language that we have a certain twang, even though we all speak English, and from America, there's a certain Southern drawl that people have when it comes to defining where they are, where they're from. Or these certain words and phrases that they have in our culture, slang, that we speak, that all speaks to their metaphors, and they don't necessarily mean what they mean. So we can't ignore that. So we jump all over that and just say that this verse means that we have a superior claim to God than any other religion. And that's just not the narrative of that verse. And then two, it don't register truly with the heart of Christ and the heart of God to uh, claim the superiority reference of religion, right? Jesus doesn't testify to being a Christian, nor does God. And so when Jesus said he's the way, I am, which speaks more to that reality of being, a nature of being. And so this also speaks to the larger conversation Jesus was having with some even religious leaders. These were not unlearned men. They were speaking more text in the old covenant language and understanding in context. And Jesus is like, hey, listen, the kingdom of God is not about this observation of this physical dominance or political uprising. Some want it. No, this is about a reality of who you are, and your connection with God. That it's not about this system. It's not about these systems of approach. It's not about these systems of violence. It's not about these systems that are attributed to man just living out of his humanness rather than his awakened I amness, if you will. And so Jesus was awakening, challenging his audience to wake up to the connection that they already have with God. And so that doesn't speak well to the present system of the day, because the present system of the day is the temple, going to the temple, sacrifices, everybody paying their money for the best dove, for the best, we're gonna sell the dove, the prettiest doves and calves at the highest bidder. We're gonna make a little money at the temple, for the temple sacrifice. And so everything that goes into that, because again, that's systems. That's how prone we are in our mentality, in our humanity, to systems, and gaining and to get ahead of each other, through our systems. And this is where we got systematic oppression, racism, and things like that, because these systems create these dichotomies, the us versus them, and perpetuate that. But when we wake up, that there's no one greater over the other, that we all are connected, that we all are one, that we all fashioned in love. There's no barriers or boundaries, religious wise, dogma wise, that separate us from the love of God. And so if it don't separate us from the love of God, don't separate us from the love of each other. If we can grasp that, if we could, and I think we're waking up to that. We're waking up to that. We want Western Christianity, as a whole, to wake up to that. And I think more and more statistics and research is affirming that there is a shift, there is a reformation that's taking place. And it's not unique within our Christian context. This is happening in other religions, if you will, across the spectrums and the ideologies of beliefs, and people are realizing that they are free people. They have always been a free people. It's about love. It's not about oppression. And so it may look like social justice. It may look like Black Lives Matters. It may look like women's empowerment, and that's because the call of the Spirit is liberation, is freedom, is liberty. And so it may look like Cubans, advocating for what's in their well-being, in their best interest, and not just in the best interest of a select few that sit at the top, and that dictate to others, and try to influence and control other lives. It's consolidate power into one. That's not kingdom. Kingdom, everybody has power. No man is an island, but no man alone can rule and be king, because we're all a kingdom of kings and priests, and all carry the in our DNA, coded in our DNA. We carry life. Like Dr. Bruce Lipton said about if we can understand that we're made up of 50 trillion cells, right? Trillion cells in our human body that is of intelligence of in and of itself. Nobody commands. They don't have to take instructions like, okay, sell for water, sell for making my skin to oil up. Cells, to move certain things in the body. We don't command it. It's life in it. I came that you may have life and life more abundantly. And so that is a becoming aware of becoming aware of the beauty of our own human existence, and at the core of our existence is God. That God is not out there. There are no external pursuits, the rat race that religion often offers to give us. Now, it's giving me language, my Christian faith, my Christian practice in life is giving me language, giving me context. And so I still shout with the best of them, but I don't shout because I need God to do anything for me. I love it. It's part of my experience. It's part of my faith practice and experience. So it's no longer doing to do to get, right. It's more of being, and that becoming more normalized in life than it is about these external practices. It's more of a value of your heart and your life, because you know that you're more than the sum of your parts. You're more than these labels that we like to place upon ourselves. At the core of our human existence is God. And so Jesus said, no, you're not that, you are God's, these little GODs. And so Jesus saying that I'm the way, the truth, and the life, what he was saying was, he's saying the way and the essence of I am. And what I'm telling you about your own existence, about my existence, your existence, our shared existence. He is the firstborn of many brethren. His testimony, the testimony of Christ, is not just the testimony of Jesus. The testimony of Christ is also the testimony of humanity. And so we're all in Christ. Christ is the essence and the substance of things in life hoped for, right? It's the form and the shape of life. Existence itself. Now we may say arguably, objectively or subjectively, all are in Christ, but not all are experiencing that reality. And the sad part about it, those that claim Jesus, in some instances, are not experiencing a reality that's there for all too, because in some instances, in some circles, and if I feel like I'm attacking Western Christianity, probably in some aspects I am. Jesus becomes a part of an agenda. Then more so an awareness of understanding a reality of life to live in his message, and the thinking that he conveyed in the life that he demonstrated in reality thereof. That this is not some exclusive life for Jesus. This is an exclusive life for humanity. Jesus showed us what we are and who we are in a different humanity. We can live as a different humanity. And again, that goes back to our perceptions and how we perceive ourselves. and about their theory about those teachers and how they saw those students. If we shifted our perception and saw ourselves really how Father's seen us, it could change the world. It could change the effect in how we see ourselves and how we see others. So that's important, and it's important how you see yourself and how you see others. And so, if anything or any takeaway from this lecture series that I want anybody to have, those that are watching or those that will tune in later, that I want you to have is to understand that there's divinity in your human existence. Okay, not just what we, like people want to recognize curses and things like that. There's blessings attached to your DNA. There's life attached to your DNA. There's love attached to your DNA. All the intelligence and all that we believe and perceive that God is not just out there somewhere, but is in us. All the intelligent design of perceptions of life and reality. Ooh, God is so awesome. Look at how he made the moon. Ooh, God is so awesome. Look at how he caused the sun and the rain to come. And ooh, God is so good. Don't stop there. But at this God, that is so good, sits at the core of your human existence. It's tied to your DNA. So in as much as God is good, you are good. And so that's how that is a part of our human existence, not just evolving from monkeys, apes, one cell amoebas, or if we came from Adam and Eve and Adam did the dun da da, and Eve did the dun da da, got kicked out the garden. You can grapple, in those schools of thought. But I just want to say, no matter where you may land on this spectrum of belief and dialogue when it comes to our human existence, but one thing's for sure, one thing's for certain. We are beautifully and we are wonderfully made. There's no denying that. The science backs that up. We're beautifully and uniquely made. We can shift our realities. We can heal ourselves. We've seen the effect through the placebo effect and the power that's latent within us. And we're starting to wake up to this core essence, power, chi, energy, spirit, anointing, whatever you want to call it. No arguments on me on that or what you want to call it. It speaks to the reality of the essence of our human existence. Learn to accept that maybe there is a divinity to our anthropology, right? So this is a part of continued conversation and dialogue that I'm going to continue to have about our divine anthropology, looking at schools and thought perspectives and building that in a nexus of a context of conversation that we can have and we can explore and talk more about our human existence. Thank you for tracking with us here at Sunday School Live with your host, Jermaine Thomas, A.K.A. the Professor. Thank you for tuning in. There'll be an update on upcoming shows and where we'll pivot and where we'll go from here, exploring themes, subjects with respect to our Christian faith, studying it and looking at it from various schools of thought and perspectives, theologically, philosophically, scientifically, in some respect. So thank you again for tracking with us here at Sunday School Live. This is your host, Jermaine Thomas. I hope something I shared and stated that would empower you, encourage you, but more importantly, challenge you to think. Thank you, guys. God bless our Goma family as a whole and those that continue to support us here on Goma. Like and share. God bless you. And I hope to see you guys all next week. God bless.